Hey guy, happy holidays, or like belated holidays, I guess. Last week I was sick, with the Utsa video. I was actually sick for the entire Christmas holiday, so that was fun. But at least I'm not sick anymore, so I can make this BOA video. Finally, BOA, at last. I've promised it for a while, and here it is. Here's my OP09/10 list. The only difference here is Kiros. I'll explain that a little later. I've also have some notes on the side, so I don't go off the top of my head all the time. So let me explain this list, because I actually think BOA beats Blackbeard pretty comfortably. Like, I haven't played in a while, and like I just pulled up a BOA against the Blackbeard on the sim, and I'm just like, okay, cool. That was actually pretty easy, and I messed up. So I think you can beat Blackbeard with this list pretty well if you know like the basics of BOA. So her leader ability, and what I really like about her deck list, is that you're not afraid to counter. Here's why. So if you have 5 or less cards, you draw a card if you basically make a character leave the field from one of your effects. So as you can imagine, we're going to be running a lot of stuff that bounces cards or bottom decks cards. So we're running our Graveblades, our Red Rocks, our Kaidos, Laws, Jozu, eventually Kiros. I don't have Kiros in this list right now because he releases in 10. But honestly, I just have an extra Dofi, Kaido, and Goku. We're running a lot of stuff that bounces cards, and because we're going to be drawing a lot with leader effect, we're not really afraid of countering. And we're running 12 2k counters, so that's a pretty good number in my opinion. And we're running a lot of stuff with counter anyways, so we're not really afraid of countering, just because we're going to be drawing into more counter anyways. And if not, like, we're going to be drawing into our basically end game board. So we got our Kaido, Kiros, and Jozu. I know I say 7Ks aren't really boss bodies, but like the fact that he removes something is pretty damn good, especially paired with your leader effect. So something to look out for. So I'm gonna talk about the core cards in this deck list first. It's pretty kind of self-explanatory just because it's very similar to Dofi, like the core cards at least. So we got Dofi, Kaya, Kaido, Jinbei, Goku, Jozu, this Law, and then your bounce events. So half of your deck, like more than half of your deck, is actually your core. So it's a pretty easy deck to build in my opinion. The techs here are the Law Blocker here, the Buggy, and the Prona. So I'll explain these 3 cards first, especially against Blackbeard, because again, this deck list, I sort of built it with Blackbeard in mind, but it does well against other decks as well. But your Buggy, Prona, and Dofi, if you guys haven't been in the loop of One Piece TCG lately, like there's been a lot of these cards being played, and it basically lets you rearrange the top cards. This is good in BOA because it lets you sort of determine what you draw into with leader effect. So you can essentially plan your bottom decking and your bouncing, just so you can draw into certain cards you need. Like, let's say you need like your boss bodies, or just another Jinbei, or like any of your events. Like, these 3 cards let you set up for those on curve. So really good cards to have, and honestly you want to play these cards as soon as possible, especially against Blackbeard, because once you start using leader effect, you're not going to be able to use it anymore. So you want to get your value with them as fast as possible. So I actually used to play BOA in 08. And I never played Kaya, mostly because I always went second, and I would always play Jinbei into Dofi or Jinbei into Gecko, but we're not doing that anymore because we actually want to go first. I'll explain why a little later, but we want to play Kaya if we need to filter, because for the Blackbeard matchup, we want to hit our Red Rocks and Graveblades as soon as possible, and Perfume Femur would be like perfect. We want to hit our events, and we want to make sure we have counter in our hand. So Kaya really does help with that, and honestly, like, if the Blackbeard messes up, or if we're not even facing Blackbeard, we could just pick it up with Jozu or Law. Like, I think Law and Jozu both enable you to play Kaya a little more freely, just because you're not going to lose that 2k. Because before this card came out, it would always be so hard to play out Kaya, because there's no way to get Kaya back with Gecko, because Kaya is not a Warlords card. But now you could just pick her up. So that's pretty good. And you're filtering your hand, you're seeing what you need. With BOA, you actually kind of want to go through your deck as much as possible, because you want to hit your events and your big boss bodies like as fast as possible, so you have them ready for curve. So that's your sort of turn 1-2 play. So for your matchup against Blackbeard, you want certain cards. You want either Dofi, Prona, Buggy, Law, Blocker, Jinbei or Law, and then any of your events in your hand, or Goku actually. So any of these cards, 3, 2, 1, bang. One or two of those cards in your hand is probably the perfect start. I would actually prefer to see at least a Red Rock or a Perfume Femur in your hand, just because those are key cards against Blackbeard. Everything else you could probably survive with countering, but those two cards are, in my head, the priority. So before actually starting the video, I want to explain why Gecko is missing. And again, this is specifically for Blackbeard, but again, like, I don't think Gecko is as important anymore, just because we're bouncing cards back with Jozu, Kiros, and Law. But Gecko basically lets you pick up a card from trash, but it has to be Warlords and it has to be a 4 or less. I used to abuse the shit out of this in 08 because you could just like counter and then you just pick up your counter again. So while establishing a 5k body, which is pretty good. But with Blackbeard, we're not going to get our on-play effects, especially on our 5-dawn turn. So Gecko's nothing more than just a 4 or 5 body, which is easy for Blackbeard to remove that early in the game. So I don't think he's as valuable in this deck anymore. I think what's more valuable in my opinion is this Dofi, because you can play this guy on a 3-dawn curve, and it's a 3-4 body, which isn't much, but it is an extra body you could potentially swing with. And that's just like more threats for the Blackbeard, or for anybody else, honestly. But yeah, I just wanted to explain the Gecko before I get into the matchup I did. So here it is. Okay, here is our Blackbeard matchup. First, let us look at our opening hand. So we get a Red Rock, which is pretty important in this matchup just because you wipe their Blackbeard. We do get a Goku and the Kaya, so those are two cards we want at the beginning. We would play out the Kaya if we didn't want to filter our hand, but I think our hand is pretty good. We get a Kaido, which could be useful if we make it to a very late game. And then Jinbei is a good card to play on curve. So this is a very good starting hand. I would prefer to have Perfume Femur or like a Prona so I could set up my deck, but you know, I can't complain with this kind of hand. We're going to play out the Goku and get the Law. Nothing too different from BOA gameplay right here. Doku, here is the first weird interaction. Me personally, I would have KO'd the Goku just because it's another attacker. Maybe it's because I know my playstyle too much, but this to me is another attacker. Like, I could 5k into him, and that's just a lot of resources from his hand. He gets a life, and then he's forced to counter out or just take another life. I would KO the Goku no matter what, because I also know that BOA has events that bounces cards back to hand. I know that leader effect is a thing for Blackbeard, but you don't want to spam it all the time or else you're just gonna lose resources like super fast. So we're gonna swing 5k into lead. I got a notification on my phone. So here, the 5k, he takes a life and then he just loses the counter. Again, he wastes another hit into the Goku. And here's what I think why. So I think he's saving this Doku for like a Jinbei play or a Law play. Just because it is, yeah, see like Laboon. So he's basically getting ready for a Jinbei Law play, which is okay. That's okay by me. I guess he does have another Doku in hand. That's fine. Let's continue with our gameplay. This is actually where I mess up. I forgot I got Black Hole here because I think I was just thinking too much. So I actually played the Kaya thinking that like, okay, I could probably search for Perfume Femur a bit. Because I don't think I'm going to get value from Law anymore. Law, Jinbei maybe, but Law is kind of hard. But then I'm like, oh, whoopsies. That's my bad. We're just gonna 5k into him and then just play out the probably the Jinbei or the Law. Again, pretty standard. We have no on-play effects. That's okay. He takes the life, which tells me he wants all the cards in his hand. Okay, play out the Jinbei. We're establishing a board. That's what's important here because we want to go wide. He wants to spend all of his resources to KO. To either KO Jinbei or Kaya. He has the Liberation, I think. So that just KOs the Jinbei. That's unfortunate. This is why the Kaya misplay is even more unfortunate, is because he's swinging 7k into us. This is very hard for me to counter from just because I have 5 cards and only 3 of them are 1k counters. If I had the Kaya, if I didn't stupidly play the Kaya like I did, I would have had a 2k and a 1k, which would have been a much easier counter to do. But unfortunately, I didn't get it. Whatever, keep going. Get our life. It's a Grav Blade, which is actually perfect because we could just bottom deck these 2 cards. He black holes us. We do not care. And then we just grab like these 2 cards. So here, because we didn't counter, we got too many cards for leader effect. This is why BOA wants to counter a lot, because with plays like that, you're able to cycle through your deck more when you counter versus when you don't counter. So we want to counter as much as possible. Again, just reiterating that this is a very counter heavy deck because you're essentially rewarded for countering because you draw more cards. We drew into the Perfume Femur, but like imagine if it was like the next card, right? Like that's 1 less resource in our hand because we're drawing less with our leader effect. So I just want to explain that little side note there. Here the play 100% is Jozu and Law. So we actually have 1 extra Dawn because I think we're at 9 Dawn. So there are times where you want to swing low and swing high, especially with BOA, just because your game plan is very much like flaunt your resources, I guess. Which I guess is canon to BOA. There's times where you do want them to counter, and there's times where you want them to take life. We want them to counter as much as possible here still because we want them to be reliant on basically hiding behind Blackbeard. Because look here, we got counters to Blackbeard in our hand already. We got the 6-drop and the 6-drop Red Rock, that rhymed, and the 2-drop Perfume Femur. Both cards basically destroy Blackbeard just because we get rid of it or we just negate his blocker effect. So that's pretty good. So we want him to counter just so we're basically minimizing the amount he could counter in the end game, which we're actually getting to relatively soon because it is 2 to 3 life. So let's see what he does. He plays the Blackbeard, and then he swings with Burgess. We could counter. We do counter. This is the time where we want to counter because we know we're going to use an effect that removes one of his cards, so we're going to be able to draw. Here we take life. We play out the Law. That's fine. And then he black holes us. I don't think we care at this point. So here's what I'm thinking. So we Red Rock him. I want to get rid of 2 of these cards. So Red Rock obviously takes care of Blackbeard, which is cool. But we want to get rid of the Burgess. So he only has 2 cards. He's probably not going to want to counter out that much just because he still wants to use leader effect in conjunction with Blackbeard, basically to stop us from playing the game. I think it's okay to go for Burgess here. So we bond deck that guy, we draw a card, and then we swing 8 into Burgess. So 7 into 8. He either has the 2-key counter or he doesn't. It looks like he doesn't. And then we got the Law. 2 blockers and a Jozu. Pretty nasty. Pretty nasty. So now he's at a point where he's basically soul searching. This is what I call it, when you just don't have any plays and you're just trying to find a play. And at this point, he has so little resources that it's very hard. It's extremely hard for him to do that. This is the easiest 2-key counter in my life. He plays the Burgess and he black holes us. That's fine. Here's what I'm thinking. I think that last card is Blackbeard. So I'm just gonna try and swing for game. And honestly, if I don't get game, like, that's okay. Like, we're getting him to 0 life anyways. And even if he does play Blackbeard, we have the Perfume Femur to take care of him the next turn. So we're just going to do a wild swing with Law, see what we can get. Get rid of 2 of his cards, so I'm guessing that last card is Blackbeard. So let's see what it is. So he's going to swing into Law. That's fine, you can kill him. I don't care. Like, at this point, I actually survive. I actually survive no matter what, just because I have too much life. 2 blockers is too much. Even if he attacks with both the feet, I think we survive because we had enough counter and 2 life anyways. And then he plays the Blackbeard. Okay, and then we just Perfume Femur. He cannot use blocker, and he has no cards in hand, so that's pretty much game. So yeah, even with our mess up earlier, I think this deck steadily beats Blackbeard. So if you're having trouble with Blackbeard at your locals, give this deck list a try. Yeah, into the outro. Alright, okay, so that was the Blackbeard game. Not much to say. Even though we messed up, we did pretty well. But you saw the value in most of the cards here. Like, you saw how good the laws were at the end of the game. We didn't get a shot off the Kaido. We didn't get a shot off the Dofi or Jinbei, honestly. Like, that misplay was pretty bad. But, like, we were able to stabilize with Jozu. And honestly, these 3 events kind of destroy Blackbeard just because you get rid of his board without KOing him, so he doesn't even get the draw. And you just get rid of the Blackbeard for free. And even if you can't get rid of the Blackbeard, we're still swinging into him. Again, keep in mind he has very little resources at this point. So it's hard for him to counter out of a 7k. And it's unblockable. So this is a perfect like endgame card that kind of destroys it. You want to play out your 1-drop abilities as soon as possible in the game just because he's probably not going to use leader ability that early if you go first or second. So you want to get these effects as soon as possible because you're going to get to a point in the game where you're no longer able to use this. You kind of saw what happened with Kaya, but we were able to get a little bit of value out of the Goku. I know Kyros wasn't in this deck list because I was playing the 09 list. This is my 010 list. Essentially, the only difference is 1 less Dofi, 1 less Kaido, and 1 less Goku. There's different ratios people play with. This is the ratio I would play with just because I would actually value these cards more than Goku. Dofi, and plus, I have like 3 of these cards anyway, so like it's not like I'm not going to be able to rearrange my deck. One other tech that people do is depending on their matchups or their locals, they'll either have 4 red rocks or 3 red rocks. I personally like having Grav Blades just because of the Shanks matchups, of the Dofi matchups. It's not like those guys aren't in the meta, so I think this card's still very good against them. But this card is very good against Blackbeard, and that's why people are playing 4 of them. I think Perfume Femur at 2 is pretty standard. I really have a hard time playing 3 of this just because it's a super conditional card, and plus there's other ways to get rid of Blackbeard anyways, so it's a good tech card to have at endgame, but like it's not 100% needed. One of these 2 cards are needed, but you don't need to have Perfume Femur if that makes sense. But yeah, that's my BOA list. Finally, I made a BOA list. I'll probably have this video out later today. Today's the 29th, so probably won't make a new video until New Year's, so thank you so much to those who have stuck around. We finally passed 100 subscribers, so I want to thank everybody for sticking around with my BS, my random shit. Guys, one of my goals next year is to make more One Piece videos because these are actually really fun to make, and it seems like you guys are enjoying them. So you know what, guys, stay tuned, hit that subscribe button. There's gonna be more to come next year. And as always, leave a like or comment if you want to basically share your thoughts on this deck list. I'm always like looking at comments, seeing what other people think because I'm pretty stupid at this game. There's probably other people who are much better at this game than I am. So I'm always listening to other people's feedback, you know, seeing what other people want to do and seeing if that works with what I have in mind with these decks. Obviously, not everyone thinks the same, so sometimes we might not align, and that's okay. But it's the shared thought that counts. At least that's what I think about it. I think of this more of a community than a competitive game. So it's fun to get to talking to people and like seeing what other people think about the deck list and the leaders. So stick around. Guys, I'll see you in the next year. We finally made the BOA video, guys. Let's celebrate. Okay, guys, I'll see you next time.